Leslie.
Good job.
So, Jeff, can you open us with prayer?
Great. Heavenly Father, we thank you giving us this time, and we sing together. We learn the wisdom words from you, and we can apply that into our daily life, and we can learn how to praise, because love is from you, and so we can share that, and we can share your love in the form of praising each other. We pray that you guide us. We always and we thank you and praise you. Amen.
So,
Did you start?
yeah, sorry. So, we're actually going to start by giving Xishan because
Only the first story.
So last week, yeah, now I really want to hear what happened while you were doing that. Last week when I was talking about how if you could laugh, that it would, break the mood, a certain amount of incredulity, especially from my wife, was voiced. Yes, sir.
I also found that it's hard to get angry when you're thinking hard.
Yeah,
Thinking hard about a riddle or math problem.
yeah, if you're just distracted on something else. So somebody, I can't remember who, was like, do you have a real life example? And the best I could do was me getting upset at being absent-minded. But then the first thing that happened then early in the week is we immediately had two good examples. So I'm going to let Xishan tell her story.
Yeah, I'm going to tell a story that happened last week. Jammer's dad got rectal cancer, right? Was diagnosed with rectal cancer this March. But after 6 chemotherapy, we discovered that the first MRI result shows that the tumor is completely gone, it's completely invisible. So we were very thrilled, very happy. But the doctor said that she needs to see with her eyes to confirm the MRI, like human examination to confirm the NMR result. So the second exam, I didn't go with Jaffer. He went with my father-in-law. And so after the doctor examined, she said, okay, I only see 1 centimeter of scar. And he came back. And so I tried to congratulate my father-in-law, and I found that he was not completely happy. So I asked him, well, what did the doctor say? And he said, 1 centimeter of scar. I said, what does that mean? What's the definition of scar? Is that tumor? Then tumor is gone? And he couldn't answer me. And I started to get mad. I said, this is an important question. Why don't you ask the doctor on the spot? And we were having this conversation at the dinner table. So all my kids start we can feel the tense. And so they intervene. That's right, they intervene. And some of them said, Mommy, you need to breathe deeply. But I was still angry. I tried to teach them. I said, you guys need to learn how to communicate. If you don't understand something, ask them. Don't pretend that you understand. And then Miss Abby's comment is, Mommy, you communicate clearly, but not well. So that's the impact from Mr. Kenny.
But, so the point of the story that I was going to tell is that then what happened?
And then I started to laugh. I said, I accept your comments.
But Mom, it's not really a matter of accepting my comment. It's a matter of acknowledging it because it's still gonna be there.
So the story makes a good example of you're laughing and it helps get the anger under control. I should tell the young persons here that Abby was taking a high-risk, low-reward strategy. Generally speaking, if your parents are having an argument, you probably shouldn't step in and lecture them because usually your reaction will be laughing. Just so you know. got kind of lucky.
I have a very nice
The other story, and I've warned John in advance not to be embarrassed about this. So, you know, we videotaped this for my mom and for anyone who you know, misses out on it to begin with. And the first time that we did that in this house, we were just using a cheap little video camera, and so we got it set up and it looked fine on the little screen. But when I got home, I discovered that when you zoomed in on this, which today I've turned it all black. Today I've changed the background so that the background's black instead of white. But when it was all white, if this was too much of the picture, the camera thought it was too bright and it would dim itself down and everything except the screen would turn black. But
What?
if you watch the video, you know, you can barely see. Right? So last week, Sally and Helen were going to be late. So I carefully set it up and zoomed it nice and far out so that there would be plenty of light. But then I knew there was going to be like 15 minutes of nothing in front because I had to set it up in advance. So before I put it on YouTube, I ran in to trim that first 15 minutes off. So I got to where I found it, I started talking, and about 30 seconds, all of a sudden, the camera starts moving, and then it zooms in, and everything goes black. Because John had very helpfully and very thoughtfully noticed that Helen wasn't here, and he had gotten worried. Oh no, you know, that she hasn't set it up. And so he said, oh, it's way zoomed too far back, and he zoomed it in, and it looks fine on the little screen. In other words, he'd done exactly the same. Well, I'm watching it, and I see the camera start shaking, and I'm like, oh no, and then it zooms in. I was like, oh no, I just set that up. And I'm trying to tell myself, he was trying to be thoughtful, doing it well, and I was still, so I thought, well, God help me see the funny side, whereupon it occurred to me that I was sitting there really having a terrible time controlling my temper because somebody had messed up my video about controlling your temper. And as soon as I thought of it that way, I started laughing, and then I was fine. So the truth is, it sounds really weird to say that if you can laugh, it'll break the mood. Because it sounds like, well, you can't do that. It actually, you can do it more often than you think. That actually, you can't do it all the time, but you can do it more often than you think. So, all right, so now we are going to talk about praise for this last session. And there's not going to be a whole lot of scripture because I figure that you guys are aware that the Bible says that it is important to praise God. So obviously I could put 50 slides up with verses from the Bible about praising God. I'm going to assume that you guys agree with me that the Bible says it's important. So we're just going to sort of talk about how to do it effectively. And we're going to start with what is praise? Yeah, what is it? Why? Okay, I don't know. You just tell me what you think it is.
say good things about.
Honoring something they did or they just.
Okay, honoring something. What else? You said worship. That has to do with God, obviously. What about people?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Words of affirmation.
Yeah, information. You say good things
Also
about
congratulations.
God
And
or.
congratulations. Basically, it's expressing admiration. So, the difference between praise and thanks. Okay? If you thank someone, you're thanking them for something good they did for you. If you're praising somebody, you're just praising them because there's something good, whether it has anything to do with you or not. Right, so praise is expressing admiration. And, you know, in that Psalm 150, you praise him with the clash of cymbals and praise him with resounding cymbals. There's a sort of broad meaning of the term praise, which includes, nonverbal stuff. So like if someone finishes a song and they do really well, you clap, right? So applause is a form of praise. But there's a more precise meaning of the word. And the narrower meaning is the kind of praise that produces most of the good effects. And that is expressing in words what it is that makes somebody deserve to be admired. Right? And if you think, so there's one of the worship leaders at our church has a habit of, every so often we'll finish the song, he'll say, let's give the Lord some praise. And what he expects everyone to do is this. Like, all he means is, let's give the Lord some applause. But if you were to ask me, why is your wife so awesome? And I said, right? I mean, what would you assume? You'd assume I couldn't actually think of anything, right? You'd assume I couldn't actually think of anything good to say about her. So, generally speaking, just applause and all that stuff, it's better than not expressing admiration. It's better than booing, but it's not really praise in the strict sense. So, everything we're going to talk about the rest of the way is, so great, this person deserves to be admired. How are you going to say so? How are you going to put it into words? And again, if you're a painter, you can paint them. But for most of us, how are you going to put it into words? So, just to sort of make the distinction clear. So, you young kids may not have heard the song, Let's Just Praise the Lord. You guys remember the song, Let's Just Praise the Lord? Very common in the 70s, very popular in the 70s. Oh, and by the way, I discovered after I drew all this thing up, and since we were going to praise, I was going to use music. And I discovered that I can't really play the piano anymore, so we'll just do what we can do. So look at these lyrics, right? What key was I going to get in? Maybe F. Let's just praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Let's just lift our hands toward heaven and praise the Lord. Let's just praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Let's just lift our hands toward heaven and praise the Lord. Right? And then you do it again. So now you do it again, and the only thing that changes is voice. And then you do it again, and you change hearts. Right? Now, it's very pretty, and people, when I was a kid, loved this song. But where is the praise?
It's not in
There isn't any. There isn't any praise in this song, because this is not
It's telling you to praise the Lord.
That's right. It's not a praise song. It's a call to praise. Right? So there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm not pointing this out so that you'll think, oh, this is a stupid song, because it isn't. It's a very effective call to praise. But it's not a praise song. And if we sang the whole thing, right, if we did another verse, let's just praise the Lord, and then about the third time, let's just praise the Lord. I had a friend that he could stand about one verse of this. But then it kept going. And it just drove him crazy, because by the time he got to the third one, he was like, well, yeah, let's go ahead and do it, We can go ahead and get started, Almighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. You notice him?
Yeah.
Well, our helper, he sing. Help sing. Our helper, he amid the flood of mortals prevailing. praise. So you see the difference? And it's not that one song's good, and it's not that one song's bad.
That's the difference.
One song is praise, and it's not. And it also isn't that new music isn't praise, and because all hail the power of Jesus' name, let angels prostrate fall, is also a call to worship. There's very little praise in it. It's saying everybody come worship God, right? So, and again, I'm not telling you that praise music is better than that. What I do see a lot of is that the term praise and worship music usually means songs that are simpler than the old hymns. And ironically, most praise and worship music is very poor in praise. It has very little actual praise. And it's called praise and worship music mostly because most people in church actually don't know what the word praise means and don't know what the word worship means. Certainly not worship in the sense that the Bible uses it. So, and I'm not going to get into what worship means.
What's the difference?
So worship is fundamentally submitting yourself to God. The literal Greek word is to bend the knee, and it's what you did in front of a king when you said, I am your subject, I will obey you. So we think of worship as, a worship experience. We think about it as a particular emotion and a particular mood. Worship is actually an act of submission. But that's a separate topic, and I don't want to get off of that. But praise and worship music tends to have very little praise in it because people have come to have. So, Timothy, when I said what is praise, and because this is church, right? You're thinking in church terms. The first thing you said was worship, right? Because we just sort of have praise and worship associated. So it's just like it's very hard for most Americans to tell the difference between grace and mercy, because grace has wound up meaning the same thing in English, right? So most American evangelical Christians, praise and worship mean the same thing, which is being in church and feeling close to God, right? That's not what the Bible means by either praise or worship. And in the Bible, it's two quite different things. So today we're talking about praise in the strict sense, where this is a praise song, and let's just praise the Lord is not. And nobody is ever going to praise me for being organized. If they do, I will know that it's flattery, which is a distinction we'll come to momentarily. So, praise is a skill. So if you have somebody who has words of affirmation, to those people, the people that what makes them feel loved and their natural way of expressing love is to praise people. To those people it comes naturally. That's maybe 1 out of every 5, 1 out of every 4 or 5. Right? Most of the rest of us, especially men, have to learn how. Does it come naturally? Even more importantly, this is probably the thing that the modern American church most misses out on, is that praise is a discipline. Actually, it just occurs to me, I haven't talked. I talked with the kids about spiritual disciplines, and about the role of spiritual discipline. Or no, actually, this was the other Bible study, so I talked with Sam's about what spiritual disciplines are. I'll try to do this very quickly. So, things like prayer and Bible study, right? I forgot to do that, thanks. So we're told in church to pray and read the Bible. Right? There's all these Christian things that we're supposed to do. And I could, if I had thought of doing this, if I thought about needing to do this qualify for it. But if I make a list of Christian things to do, and I had kids do this a while back, you wind up with a list of things like pray, read the Bible, love people, forgive, right? What you wind up with is there's some things that you can choose to do, like pray. And there's other things that you can't just choose to, like joy, right? There's a difference between love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, which is, what's that? Fruit of the Spirit. That's right. Well done, Tim. Those things the Holy Spirit has to create in us. Whereas Bible study, prayer, these are things we can make ourselves do. Right? Now, the danger with the spiritual disciplines is that it is very easy for us, especially if you grow up in church, it's very easy for you to get the idea that reading the Bible makes you a better person, that praying makes you a better person, that you do these things to become a better person. And they don't. And all you have to do to realize that they don't automatically make you a better person is ask yourself whether you will ever be able to pray as much as the Pharisees did. Or whether you will ever study the Bible as long as the Pharisees did. Right? The spiritual disciplines can lead to the fruit of the Spirit, and they can also make you proud enough to go to hell. So what the spiritual disciplines do is they put us in a place where God can change us when He is ready to. Okay? So you're doing them whether you feel like it or not. That's what makes them a discipline, is that you have to make yourself do it even when you don't feel like it. But if you change, it'll be because God changes you. And also, there's a trap that you have to watch out for, which is you have a bad temper, or you have, there's some sin that you really want to get rid of. And you know God wants to get rid of it because you know God doesn't like sin. So you pray and you read the Bible and you do everything, and it doesn't go away. And after a while, it is easy to get mad at God. To say, but I'm doing everything and I'm still stuck with this, right? So it's very important to know that practicing the spiritual disciplines doesn't make God owe you the change. You don't earn the right to have God change you by praying. He can change you whenever He wants to, and He can wait as long as He wants to. It's totally up to Him. You are just obedient in doing what you're supposed to do. So Bill Bright of Campus Crusade for God, for Christ, had a great definition of successful evangelism, which was sharing God's truth in the power of the Holy Spirit and leaving the results to God. Right? It's not your job to save people. It is your job to be obedient and share the gospel. And it's up to God to make results. That is true of all of the spiritual disciplines, including your own. Right? You read the Bible in the power of the Holy Spirit, and you leave the results to God. You pray, and you leave the results to God. So these are the spiritual disciplines. Praise is a discipline, which means it's something that you do even when you don't feel like it. And it's a spiritual discipline, but it's also a family discipline. And we'll come back to that point. Praise is also an investment in a relationship. Now, there's more than, praise can be more than one kind of investment. So, you can use praise to try to manipulate people into doing what you want. Right? Because you know people like to be praised. So you can use praise for that, but that's called flattery. Alright, so when we talk about flattery, flattery is where you praise people. So, usually if I say that's flattery, most people will assume that it isn't true. that whatever I'm saying,
It
isn't
can't
true.
be true.
But it can be true, because it's not about true or false, it's about what is your motive. What's your motive? That's
拍
right.
马屁。
That's right, okay? So true praise is an act of love. Okay? So, we're going to focus on the role of families. Now, most of the stuff in here is about marriage because I'm reusing something that I did before in a class that was all adults. And I didn't want to rewrite the whole thing. So it's going to mostly be marriage. And I'll add a little bit of stuff. But it works either way. But then also the role of praise in a relationship with God. Okay? So, in marriage, because praise is a verbal skill, in marriage, usually the men need more training in how to do it. But in my experience, there's not any difference in willingness. Right? In other words, I don't see, at least, that it's more commonly the man who's willing to praise than the woman who isn't, or the other way around. What I see is that it's much more common for a man to want to praise his wife and not know how than it is for a wife to want to praise her husband and not know how. There are plenty of women who have no interest in praising their husbands. There's a verse in Proverbs that says, "The wise woman builds up her house, but with her own hands the foolish woman tears hers down." Being much more willing to criticize your husband, especially in front of other people, than you are to praise him, is a great way to tear your own house down. And I see plenty of women who have no interest in praising their husbands. But the women who want to praise their husbands can usually do it. Whereas husbands often want to praise their wives, and it's hard. Right? So we'll try to do some help with that. And in particular, Helen. So my father did a good job of teaching me how to praise. And when we get to the end and I start sharing how to do it, what you will discover is that mostly, to the benefit of the other guys here, being good at praise mostly means knowing how to cheat. So I'll basically show you how to cheat. But Helen used to love to put on her blog stuff where I would praise her. And then she would get this flood of comments from all these wives all over China saying, "I wish my husband was like, shoo did long." And I was telling her, "You are going to make me the most hated man in China among the men."
Yeah.
Right. So.
American husband.
So, well, it's mostly that I had a father who taught me how to praise people.
See, I want to say something. Like in HCC, long time ago, a sister said she wanted to invite Kenny to
She told
teach
her
those
husband.
brothers how to praise their wives. But Kenny said, "Oh, no. I don't want to be their enemy."
No, basically, I was just thinking, if ever there was someone who was set up to fail, it would be a guy who was teaching a class full of husbands whose wives had said, "You have to go listen to this guy." Because you're not good at this. So
it's
That's
important.
already a publicly not paid your husband already.
exactly, you got to go to this class because you suck at this.
So the problem is already. Can you send them to the other one?
You know how when I was talking about how come it goes so well with your kids, and I said you guys had set me up from the very beginning to succeed. Helen's friend was going to set me up from the very beginning to fail. So I'm going to share some of the things that Helen has liked at the end, and I'm going to tell you how I cheated to get them right. And the very last thing here is going to be telling the wives you have to be happy when your husband cheats, because at least he's trying. So. In the modern American church, almost all Christians now, I said the modern American church, in the modern American non-liturgical churches, almost all Christians,
What is that?
non-liturgical. So liturgical churches are churches like Roman Catholic, the Anglican, the Orthodox, where a whole bunch of the sermon is, a whole bunch of the service is already written out, and you pray it together, right? Because liturgy is extraordinarily rich in really high quality praise. As we'll see, non-liturgical Christians have one set of problems, and liturgical Christians have a different set of problems. So I'm not saying the liturgical way is better. But almost all non-liturgical Christians now need training in the spiritual discipline of praise, because over the last 50 years, most of the praise has actually left the service. Which I'm not saying is a bad thing, because it's a reflection of changes in the needs of the congregation. All right, so the next slide's got 5 examples of husbands trying to praise their wives. All right?
Let me get some coffee.
Gotta be at your best for this. So, one thing I learned from the last time I did this, actually, don't rank them on the scale from 1 to 10 to go through at the beginning. We'll rank them at the end. For right now, just try to say good or bad. Okay, is this good or is it bad? And also, be asking yourself, if it's good, what makes it good? If it's bad, what makes it bad? Okay? So, I hope this is big enough for people to read in the back.
Oh.
I
All right.
can see.
So I'll say it out loud. I have to say, so this is a husband talking to his wife. I really admire how patient you are with the kids. I know sometimes they drive you crazy, but you do a really amazing job of controlling your temper and focusing on addressing the issues rather than just losing it. So, good or bad?
Good.
Good.
Detail.
Sounds
Good.
good.
So
Sounds
I did this with the class at Sugar Creek, and it was hilarious. I wasn't actually prepared for this response, but it was really funny. I put that up there, and there's silence except for about 6 different women all said, "Oh." And then one of the husbands, he's kind of a smart aleck, so he's articulate if there's a joke to be made, but I know that he's not, but he's crazy about his wife, but I can imagine that he has difficulty with this. He says, "A woman must have wrote that."
Wait, did Rand actually write this?
I actually wrote that one. It took a long time trying to make it.
I don't think men can.
Long time or hard
Long
time?
sentences.
Yeah, I wrote it out. So careful.
So we need to bring our boys to this class.
Yeah.
Help them
Yeah,
date.
yes.
You're lucky.
Future wife.
You're lucky. Because you're Randrich. From this class. You need to teach your friends. Boys meant to
Keep it
debate
secret.
night.
So,
I don't know how to debate with wives.
Michael G is teaching them.
Where is Caleb?
how
I
about
went to debate class.
so here's one.
Elijah, same class?
Really?
Yeah.
Debate.
Yeah.
teaching.
Yeah, my sister's the coach.
Oh, really? Oh, my goodness, okay.
I'm not sure it's the same class. It's pretty different.
All right, here's the next one. Sweetheart, I want to praise you today. I asked you to sit down and talk to me so I can praise you. And I just want you to know it's important for me to praise you.
Too many, it's too redundant. That's cheesy. Too redundant.
It's so
not that bad.
self-centered.
So bad.
The biggest thing is there's no praise.
It's empty. It's empty.
It's just like a song.
If you change it
It's
to
just
God,
like the song.
if you change it
It's
to God,
exactly
it was
right.
perfect
Well
life.
done, well done. I deliberately modeled this off of Let's Just
To
Praise
God,
the
I
Lord.
want to praise you today.
There is no praise. There's no praising,
Yeah.
right? And so you're right. So it's all about me because there's
It's
no
all- yeah, there's no-
praise.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now this next one is actually based on a real conversation. So this is where Helen starts getting it. So I will just tell you guys, Helen is going to get praised a lot, and the reason is I'm trying to use real life examples. And obviously, the person I tend to praise is Helen. So she's going to be embarrassed a lot. She's going to deal with it. The praise I want you to focus on in this next bit is actually the praise that my mother saying in the middle of it. So this is me telling Helen about a conversation I had with my parents.
Oh my gosh.
So I started talking about how much time you spent working with those cancer patients, and my parents couldn't say enough about how blessed they are to know that their grandchildren has a mother who set such a godly example for them. And my mom said she's never seen anyone who could make such sacrifices for other people and do it with a spirit that said it was a true privilege and not a burden to be able to serve. And we all wound up agreeing if I could pick from any of the women in the world, I should. Right? Now, so obviously that's good. Why is it good?
It's about her.
It's about her.
It's about,
Praising what she did.
It's praising what she did.
it
Yes.
has deepness.
So it's detailed.
Detail.
What, yeah, okay.
Making her feel good.
It doesn't. So it made her feel good when I told her. But you'll notice she's not in this conversation.
It doesn't make me feel
It
good.
embarrasses her right now. The most powerful thing about my mother's praise of Helen is that she was praising Helen to somebody else. Right? That it was public praise. When you find out
Cool.
that they have been praising you when you're not there, right? Public praise is all of the things being equal is more powerful. There's, you are so pretty and I love you so much. If you can get the kids to bed early tonight. Actually, you can think about the fact that my audience is mixed. I haven't used this one
Skip it, skip it.
without thinking about it too much. The same guy who said a woman must have wrote this, as soon as that came up, he said, that's manipulation. And at the same time he was saying that, one of the other wives, not his, but one of the other wives was saying, flattery, it's flattery. Yeah, so there's clearly a ulterior motive. Now, the next bit, when I was doing this at Sugar Creek, I just hit the next bit because they all knew the story. But the guy, the week before I did this class at Sugar Creek, the guy who went before me, none of us realized it, but it was his 17th wedding anniversary. And without telling his wife in advance, he started, oh, please don't say something this again. This works when I am,
In the house.
yeah, I did this 3 times at the house to make sure I wasn't going to have the same problem. All right.
Click it.
Yeah, it works.
Well, and now I'm going to just have to describe it because it says, why can it not play media here? How very annoying. So, he said, before we start, I want to play a video. And he put a video up where he said, talking to his wife, he said, Jessica, I've wanted to do this for for years, so I'm going to do it now for our 17th anniversary. And then he sang quite badly, because he's not a very good singer. Not quite badly.
Not really good.
Just not professionally. Not professionally. He sang the Jim Croce song. Hope you don't mind, I hope you don't mind that I wrote down in words how wonderful life is. You're in the world. So he sang that song for her on the video in front of the class.
Is his wife there?
His wife was there. His wife was there, right? So, and I have to tell you, I started playing that, and you know, I played a few bars, and I was like, that's enough of that, because when he did that, I was sitting there and I was looking around, and all the women in the class were, and all the men were looking at Stan like, thanks a lot, man. So some general characteristics of good praise, of good high quality praise. First of all, it is sincere. This I think is actually really important, and I think it's a mistake a lot of people make. So I'm going to tell you a true story about my daughter Mary. So Mary always loved to sing. From the time she was a really little girl. This is the one who asked me to shave my beard back on. This is her. So, and she wasn't a child prodigy or anything. You know, it's not like when she was 2, she started singing and we said, oh, we have to get her lessons. But she loved to sing, so we put her in a choir, in a children's choir, in a community children's choir that had a good training. And she wound up singing in Katy High School choir, which was one of the 2 or 3 best in Texas while she was there. And her senior year, they put her name on the plaque as the outstanding student in the choir. And she went to U of H, and as a freshman got into their ensemble, which is a genuinely world-class ensemble. So at this point, Mary actually was a world-class singer. Right? So I went to the first U of H concert that she did. And after it was over, she came up to me and she said, Dad, what did you think? And I told her, it was awesome. And I this piece and that piece. I gave her 5 or 6 different places where I'd been sitting there saying, I cannot believe what I'm hearing. It was really incredible stuff. So I told her that, and she went off very happy, right? Then, at the next concert, after it was over, she came up with 2 or 3 of her friends, and she said, how was it? And so I told her, it was great, it was awesome. A few days later, I got a phone call from Mary, and she said, Dad, I just wanted to tell you, I finally understand. All those years when I was singing, we'd have a concert, and I would ask you after it was over what you thought, and you would say, well, it was really pretty good. This part was good, that part was good. The tenors were a little flat on this part, but it wasn't that bad. And you would go through it, and you would say what was good, and you would say, what was bad. And it used to really hurt. Because all the other little girls' dads just said, you guys were awesome. And I used to think, why can't you be like the other kids' parents? And she knew that one of my rules was I never gave praise that I didn't mean. But she was just like, well, I wish you would. All the other girls' parents did. Then she said, but after our first concert, when I asked you what you thought and you said it was awesome, she said, I went back into the choral room and I was on top of the world. I was just floating. And the other people were like, what's up? And I said, this is so great. My dad thought we were awesome. And they all said, well, yeah, he's your dad. And she said, I said, no, you don't understand. My dad never gives praise that he doesn't mean. And they were like, really? Because, our dads. So she said, after our second concert, everybody came up to me and they wanted to know what my dad thought. She said, your opinion meant more to them than their own dad's because they knew that yours, you really meant it. So the problem with sort of giving insincere praise is that you debase the currency, right? Once you start praising people and saying things that you don't really mean, but you want them to feel good, once they figure out that you don't always mean it, then it's not worth that much. Right? So I am not saying that you should never praise your kids and you should never praise your husband. I'm just saying you should be praising them. But what that means is you should be looking for things that you can honestly praise them about. It's actually really important not to just sort of take the easy way out and say, oh, that was great. And I can assure you, it is not always easy When your wife says, how was when she's trying new food and she says, how was it? It is not a lot of fun actually to say, this didn't work. But if you want it to count when you say, this is awesome, this is a keeper, you better be willing to say, this one didn't work. Because if you always say, it was great, then when you say it's great, it doesn't mean as much. It's actually difficult, especially if you're conflict averse the way I am. It's difficult not to tell people what they want to hear. But you have to make sure your praise is always sincere.
Because if it's not sincere, just don't say it.
Yeah, well, again, don't say it if it's not sincere, but really it's find something that you can sincerely say. And praise that. You want to be praised. So the trouble is, and this is one of the many reasons that praise is a discipline. Okay? The tendency is, if there's nothing obvious to praise people about, the tendency is to just say, you were awesome. Because it's work to pay enough attention to figure out what they deserve to be praised for. The easy thing is to just say, oh, it was great. So praise needs to be sincere. When someone knows that every time you praise them, you totally mean it, that praise has power. But every time you praise somebody, and it's just sort of the easy way out, it's not sincere, that makes your praise worth less and less. So, good praise is specific. So, this is the difference between saying, you're really pretty, and saying, when you smile and there's just the one dimple, that is so cute. It just turns me out every time I say it, right? Good praise is specific. Anybody can say, you're awesome. Okay, it's praise. But what does it even mean? Like, anybody can say, I can say that to somebody I don't even know. Dude, you're awesome. Right? To praise somebody about something that's particular to them, you have to actually have been paying attention. And by the same token, good praise is personal. The more that it's something that is different from them than from other people, the more power it has. Right? Non-manipulative, I think, should be obvious. It's creatively and skillfully expressed, and this is where most men sort of run ashore. And so, again, you're going to hear me say this a lot, you can cheat. Okay? It needs to be creatively expressed. That does not mean you have to be the one that creates it.
What, Google them?
Yeah.
Yes!
Yeah.
Yes! Google love poems, find one and memorize it. I'm going to talk at the end about all the different ways you can cheat. All right? God didn't make everybody good at talking.
Yes.
Right? So, good praise is well expressed, but that doesn't mean that if you can't compose lovely things, that you can't do good praise. It just means you take other people's. Right? It works fine. It works fine that way. So, this is actually one of my favorite proverbs. The word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in the setting of silver. When you find the right way to say it, the way that is just, that gets, there's the French phrase, le mot juste, the exactly right word. That makes a huge difference. Where appropriate, it's public. Right? Basically, good praise comes from taking trouble. That's really what it comes down to. Good praise is not lazy praise. Good praise takes work. You have to pay attention to the person. You have to pay attention to them carefully enough to start seeing all the things that deserve praise. And then you have to think about, well, what is the right time and place, and what's the best way to do it? Or I should say, not what's the best way to do it, but what's a good way? How can I do this where it's more effective than just saying, hey, that was cool. Right? I'll give a counterexample for good praise being public. So, Caleb's not here, but here comes Caleb. So, if you're at the dinner table and Caleb says to his mother, Mom, I'm very impressed that you, that I'm your favorite child. I think that speaks very well for your judgment. That's probably not going to go over very well for being public, right? Actually, you do have to be careful about praising people in public, because you have to be careful about inadvertently hurting other people's feelings. You have to be careful about inadvertently revealing a confidence, right? If you publicly praise the pastor for what a great job he did in resolving the conflict between those two people, right? So another proverb that I didn't put up here is like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who has no discretion. So good praise is public where appropriate. So you have to be careful about the public praise because you have to use discretion. Okay. The rest of it, good is just good. Now, this I think we've covered in the earlier stuff, so we can go through this fast. Every joyful person that I know is someone who is full of gratitude and has no bitterness. And I'm pretty sure we've talked about this. So, I think so. So we have plenty of reasons to get upset, plenty of reasons for most people to be grateful. There are some people who are just really bad news, but that's a small percentage. So most people, we get plenty of reasons to be upset. We also get plenty of reasons to be grateful. You want to avoid bitterness, and you want to cultivate gratitude. And we talked last week, I know we talked last week about how low expectations is a key to avoiding bitterness and resentment, right? Key to cultivating gratitude is praise. If you are following the discipline of praise, what that means is, look, if you say, I am going to praise my husband at least once a day, after 5 or 6 days, you will start having trouble thinking of something, right? You'll use up all the easy stuff right away. And once you've used up all the easy stuff, now you have to start paying attention, because you have to start looking for things, because I've got to praise him about something today, right? And you have to start looking. Once, you know how you buy a new car, and you buy the new car, and then all of a sudden, everywhere you look, that particular kind of car is everywhere.
Yeah, sadly.
Right? Right? And of course, they're there the whole time. Only now you're noticing them. Okay? It is very, very easy to literally just fail to notice all the cool things about the people around us. And the discipline of praise, if you're going to praise people, you're going to have to make yourself pay attention, because you run out of the easy stuff first. But once you're paying attention, it's amazing how much is there that you didn't notice before. Okay? So, let's talk about the benefits of being praised. So we're going to talk about the benefits of being praised, and the benefits of praising someone, and also the benefits of being around and overhearing the praise, and then we'll talk about some of the dangers. So, first of all, you know you're appreciated. You'll notice, by the way, that each of these benefits are associated with some of the characteristics of good praise, right? This is why those characteristics make this good praise. So it's important for praise to be sincere and non-manipulative, because if it is, then the person knows they're being appreciated. Right? If it's specific and personal, you know they've been paying attention. You know they've been noticing. You know you're not being taken for granted. So, if If every time you come home you tell your wife you're very pretty, well, after a while you'll find you're very pretty. I will now say something that I am not at all good at. If you come home and you say, "Oh, you got your hair cut, it looks awesome," which I think I have succeeded in doing once in 8 years.
Last week.
When she came back with it curly, I noticed. If it's just a different length, actually, when she puts it in bangs, because I like that, so when she puts it in bangs, like, that's good. But if you just come back, "Oh, you're really pretty," if it's not specific, then that can just be something you're saying. You know that the things you're doing are making a difference because they're being noticed. The other thing is, if the praise is public, other people, besides the one who's praising you, start saying, "That's right. He is good at that." Right? That's right, she does do that a lot. So that praise is it's sort of a love multiplier. Right? When you get praised in public, other people start noticing the good things about you. And it makes it easier for them to appreciate you. Okay? And if your love language is words of affirmation, then obviously when you're praised, you feel loved. We went through that slide fast simply because I think most people know that being praised is nice. So, I'm more interested in the benefits of praising. Okay? So, praise leads to gratitude, which leads to joy. That's the first big one. Okay? Second one is praise leads to gratitude. This is a big one. So we could repeat this, lots and lots of times. This is by far the best thing that praising people does for you. Praise is directly related. Your ability to praise people and your habit of praising people is directly related to how much gratitude you feel and express in your life, and that feeds straight into joy. Okay? You start noticing things to love about the other person that you wouldn't have noticed, which means it becomes much easier to love them. Right? If you think about it, and this is easier for kids, I think, sometimes. What you mostly notice about your siblings usually are the things that really annoy you about your siblings. Right? Okay. So, I happen to know all your siblings, and you have very cool siblings. So, if the things that you notice are the things that annoy you, that's just because you're not paying attention to all the cool things about them. Because you guys actually have some pretty cool siblings. So, making it a habit to praise your brothers and sisters is a very good way to get you to actually notice that not everything they do is annoying and that actually they're pretty cool. Okay? And then we mentioned this. When you praise someone to other people, it helps other people praise them. But have you ever noticed, so think about how much more fun it is to go to a football game if you go with a bunch of friends, as opposed to going to a football game by yourself. Yes, I'm sorry.
I haven't been to a football game.
So what, I'm trying to think, like if you go to a concert, have you gone to a concert?
Yes, and then I fall asleep.
Well, I don't have any good examples for you. I'm afraid you're just not going to understand this one.
Take an invite.
Let's say you have a birthday
Take
party.
If you-
Watch a movie.
It's so much more fun to share the fun,
Yes.
right? So, what praising someone in public does is you get to have the fun of admiring them with other people. You get to share that pleasure, which makes it much nicer. I had, Helen gets so tired of me dragging her painting out every time anyone comes over so I can show them. But it's just so much fun. Look at what my wife did. It's awesome. And this is the last thing. In Matthew 7:1, Jesus says, "Judge not lest you be judged." And most people take that to mean, you know, if you judge other people, then God will judge you. It seems to me at least very possible that Jesus was actually just saying, look, this is the way life works. If you are eager to point out other people's faults, if you are not someone who cuts other people slack, sooner or later, you're going to mess up. And people will not be in any mood to cut you slack. If you run around pointing out other people's faults, people will be happy to notice all of yours. Because overwhelmingly, so there's a small group of people who are just jerks and nothing you can do can keep them from being jerks. And there's a small group of people who are saints and they're going to be nice to you no matter what. But the overwhelming majority of people in the world are reactive. They treat you how you treat them. So, when you praise other people, that causes you to notice all of the good things about them, but you are also training them to notice the good things about you. So, if you find your siblings annoying, they probably find you pretty annoying too.
That's about right.
So, if you start sincerely pointing out all the cool things about them, one of the things you will see happen is they'll start mentioning cool things about you. They will start noticing the cool things about you because we tend to treat people the way they treat us. So, if you have a family where you get a habit started of criticism, then everybody winds up criticizing everybody else. If you have a family where you establish praise, people start praising everybody else. And one of those families is a whole lot nicer to live in than the other one is. Right? And again, this is not like, I mean, there are people that you can't do anything about. But most people are reactive. So, then we have the benefits of hearing other people praise. So, you find out things to love about the other person that you wouldn't have noticed yourself. And this is one of the reasons that God doesn't just want us to praise Him, but He wants us to praise Him together. So I think C.S. Lewis said that every person is created where there's something, some aspect of God's perfection that person can see, and that none of the rest of us can see unless they show it to us. That each of us is unique, that one of the ways in which we're unique is there's something that if we don't show everybody around us that piece of awesomeness of God, they won't be able to see it. And so there are, when it is common for people to praise each other in public, then what any one of us sees about another one that's cool, we all get to see. And you get to know other people better from hearing what your friends see in them. Second thing is, they may have found exactly the right way to say something. And this happens fairly frequently, that somebody who's good at praising will praise one of your friends and you'll say, that's exactly right. That's how I felt, that I couldn't figure out how to put it. That's exactly right. That's just how I feel. And now you can say it too. And what they're saying about the person they admire, you may be able to say, ooh, I know somebody else who's just like that. And I'm going to give you an example. Yeah, I don't know, Helen, at this point, you might want to just leave. Because it's going to get embarrassing for you from here on out. So, Helen, so I obviously find Helen delightful, and I obviously fell in love with Helen. I think Helen is beautiful.
Awesome.
I think beautiful. Certainly awesome, but beautiful, beautiful inside and out. But Helen has a particular kind of beauty that I really like. So I don't find Swedish blondes, Marilyn Monroe, I don't find them attractive at all. So there's a poem that when I was a kid we learned lots of poetry in school, and I think they've largely stopped letting you guys learn poetry, which I think is a shame. But there's a famous poem by Lord Byron. So have you heard the poem "She Walks in Beauty Like the Night"? Is that a familiar line? So Lord Byron wrote a short poem. It wasn't about a woman that he loved. It was, I think his brother or his cousin maybe came to party and brought his wife, and his wife had a particular kind of beauty. She was a dark brunette, not flashy at all, but a sort of subtle beauty, but also a very visible character and beauty of personality. And he saw her at a party and was so struck by it that he went home and wrote this poem. And there was a point when I was married to Helen, when I thought of that poem and suddenly thought, that's Helen. That's Helen. And I hadn't thought about the fact that I like the fact that that she's basically dark complexion, but that her eyes are really bright. But it's right. It's her. And I hadn't put it all together until suddenly it struck me that that poem was about her. So this is the poem. She walks in, and people used to have this memorized. She walks in beauty, like the night in cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, that thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven's gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, and half impaired, the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek, and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent. They have mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent. Now, I am not a poet, and I could not possibly have written that. But when I read it and suddenly thought, that's Helen, I actually understood better why I think Helen's so beautiful. And it ties with me to that. I don't know if you even remember this. When Helen and Kai first got here, I took them on a tour of the Western United States. And Helen wanted to see Las Vegas, and I was like, that's fine, we can go to Las Vegas. But after Las Vegas, I drove her north, up into the deserts of Nevada and the mountains there on the border. I had spent a summer at Deep Springs College, up in the mountains up there. And we went up there at night.
Stop.
And so you do remember. So I didn't know whether she would remember. Helen and Kai were asleep. So I got out into the desert, and I knew that they had grown up on the North China Plain, where there is never a truly dark, no light pollution, no matter where you go, it's big. So I had grown up out in the country. I grew up where I could get 20 miles from the nearest street light. But I knew they hadn't. So they went to sleep, but I drove out into the desert, and then I woke them up and said, I want you to see this. They'd never seen the Milky Way. You know, they'd never known why it was called the Milky Way. But that the dark sky that was midnight dark and yet full of light. Right? That's now it's time for me to love, right? And her particular kind of beauty. And I could never have written that, but once somebody else did, it showed me, even though he wasn't writing about her, it showed me something about her. And I'm glad to know. So, this is thanks to you, Hangman, because I didn't include anything about the dangers of praise when I did this with Sugar Creek. But your comment about worrying about making your kids conceited,
Oh, yeah.
right? That's actually a good point. So I wanted to talk about, so I added this slide, thanks to you. There's two dangers in careless praise. So one of them is you can, and this is especially true with parents with kids, you can turn your kid into a conceited kid if you're careless about how you praise them. The other thing, you can mislead people. You can get them confused about the basis of their acceptance. This actually happens more often than you would think with parents who love their kids. And yet the kids wind up not feeling accepted, and it's remarkable. It can be because of how you praised them. So, love, and again, love the sin and hate the love the sinner and hate the sin. Love the sin and hate the sinner. There we go. Love the sinner and hate the sin. Right? Love is unconditional. Praise you need to deserve. Right? Praise needs to be sincere. Respect, having respect for other people. Respect for God's image in the other person. That's unconditional, even though you don't necessarily always respect the behavior. Trust, something that has to be earned.
Respect is not earned.
Yeah, respect. So, respect for the person as the fact that they're a human being that Jesus died for, the respect for their value.
Well, Chinese will say you didn't earn your respect.
Say it again.
Well, Chinese say you didn't earn your respect.
Now, what I find, so when you look at Ephesians, talking about husbands and wives, right? What I find is that most women don't have any trouble at all with the idea that their husbands, that God wants their husbands to love them unconditionally. Even when they're not acting in a way that's very lovable. Right? But as soon as you say that they need to respect their husbands unconditionally, right, we tend not to realize that love and respect both have to do with this person is valuable to God, whatever their behavior is at the moment. All right? So love and respect we owe to everybody. Well, we owe it to God to give everybody love and respect. But praise and trust are a different matter, right? So the problem is, if you praise your children and you're careless about it, you can, without at all meaning to and without even knowing you're doing it, your children can draw the conclusion that the reason you love them is because of the things you praise them for. That your acceptance of them is based on the things you praise them for. So, especially if you praise them for the same thing over and over, right? And that's not, obviously, that's not what you mean at all. But kids can draw, especially young kids. And the thing of it is, once a young kid gets that in their head, they don't even know that they believe it. But once it's there, it's really hard to remove it. So, some guidelines here. And I'm not saying don't ever tell somebody, I love your voice. Right? But, generally speaking, you want to praise people more for their kindness than for their intelligence. Right? You want to praise people more for how hard they study rather than for how smart they are. Right? Generally speaking. Now look, especially with girls, 99% of girls and women really want to feel pretty. Right? So I'm not saying don't ever praise their giftedness. You should certainly tell your daughters they're pretty. But you find over and over with exceptionally beautiful women that they are incredibly insecure because they've been praised so often for their beauty and so little for anything else that they're terrified that if they get old, nobody will care about them anymore. Right? You want to praise people's progress towards goodness more than where they are currently. And this goes, you read mindset, I think. So this is, so again, you don't want to praise somebody for being good at the piano. Right? You want to say, I'm really impressed with how much better you've gotten. You've been working very hard. Right? And one of the reasons is you're better off praising for people for things that are under their control. Because if you praise people for things that aren't under their control, they tend to be insecure about what will happen if they lose them. Right? For the same reason you want to praise people's good actions. You want to, instead of saying, I think it's awesome that you're so kind to your brothers and sisters, right? So it is better to say, instead of saying over and over, Timothy, you do a great job of being nice to people, right? And then a week later, you do a good job of being nice to people. It's better to be able to say, what would you be nice to? I noticed that you congratulated Mabel on the debate as soon as she came home, right? In other words, that you're praising the specific action. For people's talents and goodness, for the things that are gifts from God, it is very helpful to make sure that you praise God. This is something I'm terrible at. I praise Helen way more than I praise God for the things He's done with Helen. Okay? But she likes it. But if you're trying to keep people from getting conceited, right? Look, if your kid was born with 150 IQ, he didn't do that, right? So if you're going to praise people about how smart your kid is, you can tell your kid you're smart, it's great. But you want to be making sure you're giving credit where credit is due. So to say, instead of saying, you're smart, that's awesome, to say, it's really cool that God decided to give you this gift. I hope you use it well. Right? It's better. This, I think, is the key. You need to make sure So you want to be praising people often, but especially with kids. You want to make sure that you very frequently express acceptance and love without praise, because you don't want the kid to get the idea that your love and acceptance is associated with the good things they do, or the good things about them. You don't want your kid to get the idea that you love them because they're pretty, or that you love them because they're sweet, or that you love them because they work hard. Right? If, when you express acceptance and love, you always give a reason, then you are failing to communicate that your acceptance and love is unconditional. Does that make sense? It's a very sad thing to see when you have children who really feel like, you know, my parents just won't love me. I hope the camera zoomed out like that to get that, because that was actually pretty funny. I completely lost my point. It's a very sad thing to see some kid that has always worked hard at school and has always gotten good grades, and therefore his parents have always praised him for the good grades, and they have no idea that he's sure that if he ever gets a B, they won't love him anymore. Right? So, by all means, praise your kids. But be aware, obviously, that you don't want to praise your kids to the point of conceit. But this, I think, is more important. Because you see it with Christian kids whose parents really love them. And the parents really do love the kids unconditionally, and the kids think they are conditions. And a lot of it comes from careless praise. So, all right, I'm going to try to go through this bit quickly. More quickly, because I think that this group, I'd rather talk more about praising each other rather than praising God. So, and I'm going more slowly than I thought. So I'll just speed up through this. If you're a modern American Christian, if you compare the hymns that tend to get sung in the modern worship service, the sort of thing that's called praise and worship music as opposed to hymns, there are two characteristics. The modern stuff is way simpler. It is simpler musically, and it is simpler lyrically. And that has to do with the fact that the society has changed over the last 50 years. Do you realize that 50 years ago, at least where I grew up, there were 222 people in my graduating class, and I think 3 of us went to college out of state. Over half went into the military rather than to college, because I grew up in redneck central, right? But do you know that practically everybody could read music? Because we all grew up in church, and we grew up reading the shape note music, and the adults in the church taught the kids. So everybody in church knew whether it was a soprano, an alto, a tenor, or a bass. So you could have fairly complex chord progressions and fairly complex music. You could have some very cool hymns. The Episcopal hymnal has some really, really nice music, but it's not at all, easy to follow if you're trying to sing along. I can usually sing along with a modern praise and worship song that I have never heard before and harmonize, because it's so easy to predict what the next chord is going to be. And that's actually on purpose, because you can't put the music up and have people read it. Right? People can't read music. So if you want people to be able to sing, it has to be predictable enough for people to pick it up quickly. Right? So I'm not criticizing, I'm not at all saying that the people who run our worship service have done a terrible thing by simply, right? Kids don't grow up reading poetry anymore. People don't grow up, the old hymns are full of Shakespearean language, and we don't read the King James Version anymore, right? So there have been changes that have happened that we've responded to. But a side effect is that most of the praise has been pushed out of the service because most of the praise that automatically happened in a non-liturgical service was in the hymns. It was in, "O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made," right? This is high quality praise. You'll notice that every verse is different. There's very little repetition. There's very little of where you sing something and then you go back and you sing the same thing again and then you sing it again. Right? Right? Whereas, look, picking on John Wimber, using John Wimber as an example of how modern Christian music is not lyrically complicated is like using me as an example of how absent-minded Americans are. He's an extreme case. But look, this song is a pretty song, right? What key do I want that in? Yeah, put it in B flat. Isn't he beautiful? Beautiful, isn't he wonderful? Right? It's a really pretty song. But look at the lyrics. Isn't he beautiful? Beautiful, isn't he? Prince of Peace, mighty God, isn't he wonderful? Wonderful, isn't he? Isn't he? Then the next two verses are, yes you are beautiful, beautiful, yes you are. Prince of Peace, mighty God, yes you are, yes you are. Right? Yes you are, wonderful. Right? So,
Same as
and
the
look,
pop music.
that's the same as, yes, the same thing as
Pop music getting more
Yes.
simple as well.
I'm telling you, the leaders, the worship leaders in our churches have responded responsibly to changes in the needs of the congregation. Okay, and this is, it's just a lovely song. And it works for its purpose, but there's no praise in it to speak of. Right? I think I've got another. Yes. Son of God, this is our praise song. Jesus, my Lord, I sing to you. Come now, Spirit of God, breathe life into these words of love. Angels, join from above us. We sing our praise song. We praise you. We praise you. We praise you. We worship you. Repeat the whole song. Okay? So, and I'm not. I know it sounds like I'm making fun of the song. I'm not making fun of the song. What I'm saying is,
Difference.
what this song is providing is not praise. Okay, so whereas 50 years ago, we got lots of high quality praise sort of automatically, now you're going to have to provide it yourself. You need to supplement, because you need to be praising God with high quality praise, and it's not going to happen. At Sugar Creek, it'll only happen automatically if you go to the 8 o'clock service, which still does the old hymns, and where the average age of the people there is 87. So, that's a So that's the challenge for non-liturgical churches, is that the praise has gone out. In liturgical churches, where you still have, all these prayers and everything that are 2,000 years old and very rich, there's a different challenge. And it took me a while to figure out, now how am I going to illustrate this to a room full of people who don't know liturgy? So I'm going to use Silent Night. So you guys know this song, Silent Night, Holy Night, well, right? What, in the verse about, radiant beams from thy holy face, what are the radiant beams doing? We'll sing it. All right? You guys sing this with me.
Shining on the whole face.
Silent night, holy night, Son of God, lost to light, radiant beams from thy holy face. you know the song, what are the radiant beams doing?
Shining on the holy face. No, from the holy face.
So the holy face is shining. Yes.
This, as I say, this is a trick question, and the point of it is to let you see that if you grow up with the stuff, you memorize it before you understand it, and in fact, it becomes empty words. There are no radiant beams in this verse. Son of God, love's pure light radiant, beams from thy holy face with the dawn of redeeming grace, Jesus, Lord, at thy birth. The light is beaming, and the light is radiant. Okay? Not one American Christian out of 100 gets that question right. It's the most amazing thing. We've grown up singing it our whole lives, but you know what happens? So I did this on purpose with the phrasing. If you, so when we sing it, silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams. Now, do you hear us stop? Because we always stop in the middle. Whereas what you should sing it is Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from. Do you hear that? Now it's one sentence. Do you see? So this is the problem. And if you talk to such an Anglican, and the Book of Common Prayer and Liturgy is extremely valuable for me, but one of the reasons it is that I didn't grow up Anglican. And I discovered liturgy as an adult. And so when I read the liturgy, the words were incredible. But most of your friends who grew up Catholic or Anglican when they convert to being non-liturgical, they're like, the service has so much more meaning because I was just parodying the other words, right? When something is familiar, we can stop paying attention to it. And we're just parodying words. A mighty fortress is our God. The fourth verse starts that word, right? And the standard where I grew up was just saying the first, second, and last verse of every song. The fourth verse of A Mighty Fortress is Our God makes no sense unless you have just sung the third verse. The overwhelming majority of people, we sang first, second, and last verse because we did that with every song, and most people didn't even notice that the fourth verse didn't make sense. So it's great to have the praise in the service, but you have to actually be paying attention. And one of the reasons nobody really objected when all the praise sort of drained out of, not nobody, but one of the reasons a lot of people didn't object when the praise sort of drained out of the service is, even though they were mouthing the words, they weren't doing the praise. Right? So, the non-liturgical modern Christian just seems to sing trivially simple songs that let him feel emotionally close to God without having to be distracted by thinking too much. The liturgical modern Christian tends to go on autopilot with the well-known words so that he can feel emotionally close to God without having to think too much. Right? The real problem is concentrated thought tends to get in the way of emotion. And we tend to equate worship with emotion. Right? We tend to feel like I was really able to worship today, and what we mean is we felt really close to God. Right? And we like emotion way more than we like discipline. So, we tend to praise people and God when we feel like praising them. So, probably the single biggest point I'm making over and over, if you've noticed by now, is that praise is a discipline. Okay? So, we go to a worship service, right? how common is it for people to come out of worship service complaining that, I just couldn't really worship today, the music wasn't any good, or whatever. Right? And what we mean is, that was boring. And we think of worship, I didn't feel close to God at all. We think of it as a feeling. But the time to praise someone is not when we feel like praising him, it's when he deserves to be praised. That's important. Does that make sense?
It's hard.
So you're saying that praising is about the person, how you praise it. It's not about you.
It's not about how you
You
feel.
feel, yeah. So we tend to let's praise it. Let's quiet our hearts, open our hearts.
Yes.
So it's actually not right.
It's yes. And so, look, somebody had their hands raised. Was that you, Emma?
And,
Who's him?
Whoever it is that we're praising,
Oh.
right? So if it's me and I'm praising Helen, I should praise Helen when she deserves to be praised, not when I feel like praising her.
But how do you know when they deserve to be praised?
Because you have to pay attention.
What if you're not paying attention?
Then you're not going to praise them very much, right? So this is why, I don't think you were in here when I was talking about how most people who have siblings find the siblings really annoying. So you're sitting here doing like this. When I said that before, Timothy was sitting here doing like this. Adam was sitting here doing like this.
Sibling rivalry.
And you weren't here either at the time. So when one of the things that's very important is that you have to make a habit of looking for cool things about your brothers and sisters to mention, because it's easy to mention the things that annoy them. But yeah,
What if they don't have any cool things?
they always do. You can always find some. Well, you know what? I bet your parents can help you find some. So, if we follow the discipline of praise, eventually the feelings will follow the discipline. The problem is we tend to do it the other way. We tend to praise only when we feel like it. And if you do that, then it's easy for you to feel like it less and less often. Right? And this is one of the places, so I'm going to give you an example of how liturgy helps. Every Sunday,
What does that mean? Sorry. Being Eucharist?
the Eucharistic prayer, so I'm about to explain it.
Oh.
So, in a liturgical church, so an Anglican church, Catholic church, Orthodox church, every Sunday you take the Lord's Supper, which is called the Eucharist, and you don't have somebody in a liturgical church, you don't have somebody stand up and sort of pray an extemporaneous prayer. You pray the same prayer every time, and there's a script that you follow. And this is what we say at the beginning of the Lord's Supper every time. The celebrant, the priest or the pastor says, so actually I'll read this and you guys read the part that says people. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God. And at this point, do you think that the people respond, that's good because I feel like praising Him this Sunday? Your response is, it is right to give Him thanks and praise. It does not matter whether you feel like praising Him. He deserves to be praised. And the celebrant always, now the dots from one Sunday to the next part changes. But this is always the same. It is right and a good and joyful thing to give thanks to you, Father Almighty. You'll notice he doesn't say it is right and right now we feel good and joyful. He says it is a good and joyful thing. God deserves to be praised, and if we're in the right place, we would feel joy in praising Him. But whether we feel it right now or not has to do with us. He deserves to be praised, and we are going to praise him, whether we feel like it or not. We're going to go through the rest of the service, and we're going to praise him.
But if you are in the bad mood, you cry and say, I praise you. I feel bad.
So it is a matter of choice, actually, and this is why I'm saying praise is a discipline. Disciplines are things that you do whether you feel like it or not. And it is very tempting for us in a relationship to feel like we want to say, you know, I love you a lot right now. That's not actually praise, right? So praise so this is a distinction I really want you to get. Praise is not about I feel good towards you right now, and it's not I like you right now. Praise is you deserve to be admired. This is good. What you did is good. It is not about you or your feelings. It's about them. Okay? So, if you're trying to learn to praise God, these are just some things. You know what? I'm going to skip these. Because I want to get to learning to praise people. All right? I'll talk to you about those others later if you want. Steal. Steal. This is the, yeah. There are lots of ideas out there. Steal them. Google. Abby's absolutely right. Get on Google. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that Helen, has been very excited about. I left it in the car.
Huh?
Can you run out to the car?
Which one?
The ABCs. I think it's on the dash.
ABCs?
And by the time I get to it, we'll be back. So,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
right? I love this.
I can't read that except for the first word.
Mononga. So I thought of having help. I love this poem. This is traditional.
Oh,
I,
no wonder.
yeah, I didn't change it to simplify, sorry. So I love this. I don't know very much Chinese poetry, but I love this one. And this is an example where, so this is a variation of praise where it's praising the relationship. Where it's saying it's the combination of you and me is something so special. So now, so I'll try.
Broken and the mix.
Yeah, I'll do my best, right? Mi non, mi non, 等一下，经多，处，热如火。I love the poem. Thank you. And if you guys don't understand this, I'll put English up next. But I love it in the Chinese.
This is traditional.
I should have put it in
Yeah, he
simple.
learned
So I'm going to finish the poem. 白块里年一个你，树
年，真的叫年，是年，一个年。
树一个我，张三两个一起打破用水调和，再年一个你，再树一个我，我泥中有你，你泥中有我，我与你生同一个亲，死同一个I worked on that hard.
Yeah.
But I love that poem. So here it is in English. You and I have so much love, so
You
much love.
translated?
Yeah, I did. And waves like fire. We take a lump of clay, we spin out a you, we mold a me. We take the two us's, We shatter them both, we mix them in water. Again, we spin out of you. We mold, we knead. In my clay, there's you. In your clay, there's me. You and me, in life we share a single quilt. In death, a single coffin. Now, it's a wonderful. Now, does somebody want to tell the kids the story behind this? Or,
As husband right to wife.
so, actually, so the story behind
Right to husband.
Yeah, so do you know the whole story?
Kind of.
So well, I don't mean to make it like an exam, so I'll tell you. So, she and her husband were very much in love for many years, but when they were getting old, this was in the Yuan dynasty, so 1300, 13th, 14th century. And at the time, it was fairly common for wealthy husbands to take a concubine.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a second wife. A second wife. So her husband wrote a poem about how he'd kind of like to get a second younger wife, and he left it out where she could find it. And she wrote that and left it for him. And he didn't ever take a second wife. Even after she died. Even 3 years after she did. And even after she died, you remember.
Is that the first
And
one
death
or
is
the
in your
second
heart.
one?
Oh, he only had
Didn't
one.
be a
Yeah,
second.
did he write to the second one?
No.
Never has, he never has.
No.
He thought about it.
He was thinking, maybe I should go get a second wife. But when he left the idea, she wrote that. And it was so powerful, and especially the last line, right? So, Tony, you got war. But even after she died, he didn't remarry.
How old were they?
When she wrote this, she was 47, which at the time was old. So you can steal songs like Stan did, right? He just got karaoke. So you missed that part. It was a guy at my church who made a video of himself singing a song to his wife for her 70th, and then showed it to the class, which made all the other husbands mad at him. He made them look bad. You can steal a song and change it. I don't think I'll sing this because we're all dying.
We want to hear.
Maybe.
No,
So-
no.
There's a song. So this is that's Helen.
Oh.
First time I took her to a corporate Christmas party, and she was the prettiest girl there. And so there's a song, and there's an Eric Clapton song, "Wonderful Tonight." Oh, when you look wonderful tonight. And in the original version, he wrote it to the girl he was married to at the time. In the original version, they start off and she's trying to get dressed, and she asks him how she looks, and he says, "You look wonderful." They go to the party, he gets drunk, makes a fool of himself. She says, "How are you feeling?" He says, "I feel great, I feel wonderful." She has to take him home and put him in bed drunk, and he says, "You were wonderful," which is not very romantic, and I never did like the song that much. It's a nice melody, but, he's really kind of a jerk, and she, in real life, she divorced him like a year after he wrote the song, and I can understand why. But then Michael Bublé and Eric Mendes, who's a Portuguese jazz singer, did a version of this where they threw out the original 2 verses. And they wrote 2 more verses that were genuinely romantic, but mostly in Portuguese. But then I figured, well, if they've changed it, I can change it too. So I took their version, and then in the second verse, they still went to a party, but in the new version, she was like the prettiest girl there, and she was feeling great, and everybody was looking at her, and she was just awesome. So, and it made me think of taking Helen to the first BG Christmas party that I took her to. So I said, all right, I'll put some English in the Portuguese pieces. So you wind up with this, which is a version that's just for Helen. But if you think about it, I cheated wildly, right? Because I didn't write the music. So it's a very romantic, pretty song. I'll sing it for you later if you really want. But I turned the blonde hair to black. Right? In the party, she's also, instead of me being drunk, which I mostly stole that idea from them. I just did English, right? And so I wind up with this nice, pretty love song just for Helen. Except I did almost none of the work, right? But it's her version now, right? I will, but afterward. Or you can steal an idea. So I didn't realize Helen did not know this until we were in the car. So how many of you know that the 119th Psalm is an acrostic poem?
I don't know.
An acrostic. Okay. So the 119th Psalm, if you look at it in most printed Bibles, you notice how it's like 176 verses long. It's 8 verses a section, and each verse has a Hebrew letter at the bottom. That's because
So in
the
English,
first-
you cannot see it.
you can't see it, but in Hebrew, the first 8 verses all start with the Hebrew letter Aleph. Then the next 8 verses all start with the Hebrew letter Bet. And the next 8 start with the Hebrew letter Gimel. It is a love poem to the law of God. And there are 8 verses for every letter.
Longest the child.
Yeah, because it has 8 verses for every letter, so it goes on for a long time, right? So, it occurred to me, okay, well that's a pretty cool idea. I can do that for Helen. So I just stole the idea. So this is Helen's A to Z. Affectionate, not just to me, but to my children. Beautiful, especially when you smile. Caring, even for imaginary people in my jokes.
That's true.
And what that's about is Helen doesn't think most of my jokes are funny. And the reason is she feels sorry for the people in the jokes. So, when she first got here, I said something about a blonde joke. And she said, what's a blonde joke? So I just thought of the first blonde joke I could think of, which is kind of a dumb one. You know, there's a blonde and a brunette and a redhead who are all trapped on a desert island. And they stumble on the beach, they stumble across an old lamp, and they pick it up and dust it off, and a genie pops out and says, all right, you each get one wish. And the brunette says, well, I want to go home. I want to go home to my family. And the genie says, fine. Poof, she disappears.
Oh, I know this.
Right? And the redhead, then when they ask the blonde, the genie asks the blonde, well, what's your wish? And she says, well, this is a kind of cool place, but it's pretty lonely now. I wish I had my friends back. Yeah. Poof, poof. I told that joke to Helen, and she was like, that's so sad.
Selfish person.
D, devoted to God and His people. Excellence in everything you do.
That is women.
Faithful, you keep your word. Generous, especially with your time, which you spend unsparingly for other people's good. Hallelujah. What anybody lucky enough to have you be part of their life ought to say every hour or so. Intelligent, ferociously so. Jewels and jade, not nearly as precious as you are. Kindness, you overflow with it. Loveliness, you define it. Mischievous is what your sense of humor is, which is why I like it so much. Necessary, to me, absolutely. Oriental, a definite plus for me. I think Chinese women are beautiful, and I'm not interested in blondes, so. Perfect, you come about as close as anybody else does. Quick-witted, which is why you so often catch me off guard with deadly one-liners. Responsible, you're very careful to do everything people are depending on you to do. Sagacious, This is a fancy word for wise and prudent, which you most certainly are.
How do you spell it?
Sagiocious.
Oh, I know that.
It's easy. You reduce me to helplessness when you do this because you're so cute. Understanding because you're so compassionate. Vivacious. Oh, yes, indeed. Wholehearted in everything you do. Extremely delightful. Okay, I cheated. Seriously, I couldn't call you a xylophone or a zenithal. Youthful in spirit, like Jesus once. Zenith of womanhood is what you are. The highest point. Okay? Now, the thing of it is, so Helen liked that very much. I stole that from the 119th Psalm.
I just got to know that today.
And there's absolutely no reason that you guys can't steal this for Mother's Day.
Yes.
Because your A to Z
Yes.
will be different from my A to Z for Helen's, because your mom's not the same as Helen.
But then her mom will know.
Well, yes, they will know, but that's fine. That's actually the last point. I will scoot forward to the last point. So, this is especially important for wives. If your husband cheats, you should be grateful that he's willing to go to the trouble to cheat. Okay, so it is important for the person being praised not to be like, well, if you really loved me, you'd do it yourself. You know, if you really, you would come up with a real, look, if they go to the trouble, you should rejoice. This is the other idea, so this is another one that you guys can do, because it would be different for different people. This was one of Helen's, is this a wedding present, an anniversary present? So this is 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8. It's the section, love is patient, love is kind, right? Except that I took out the generic stuff, so remember that good praise is specific and personal.
Person.
So instead of love is patient, Helen puts up with infinite amounts of husbandly airheadedness and obnoxious teaching. Love is kind. Helen tries to make me feel better about myself, and I've messed up badly, rather than berating me as I deserve. She doesn't complain, and you see? So you're taking, I didn't make this stuff up. I took the love chapter, and then I just took out the generic words and I put in stuff about Helen. Okay? What are you doing? Don't make shadow puppets in front of my video camera.
I'm not.
So, look, Helen has put all this stuff out about cool things I've done to praise her, and I picked them just so that you could see. Literally, I stole most of them. I didn't make them up. You don't have to be creative. You can borrow somebody else's creativity. There are people all over the world who have found awesome ways to say things. You can steal them. It is way better to steal somebody else's idea than it is to not ever praise somebody.
That's plagiarism.
Plagiarism is completely legitimate when you're praising people. It absolutely is, okay? So, and I just want to give some final thoughts, and this is not just final thoughts on praise. This is final thoughts, this is what, the 9th or 10th time that I wound up sitting and talking to the kids or all of you. And so I just thought the last thing to say is to tell you very sincerely how impressed I am with all of you.
Phrases.
I am. I'm going to take my own advice. You guys are really an awesome bunch of kids. And so I have been working with kids since I was in my early 20s. And you guys have been you've been the most fun. You've been the, except for Abby, you've been the most attentive. And it's not your fault because I know she's terribly distracted. I have to make her sit in the back of the room by herself all the time as she talks to people. No, seriously, you guys have been great, and that says a great deal about you guys as parents. And I'll tell you something else. I had told people before these last 4 or 5 weeks, I had told people that it was interesting the cultural difference between teaching American adults and teaching Chinese adults.
Yeah, FCC.
Because the Americans would just leave, the hard thing to do with Americans was to get them to be quiet, but they're trying to get Chinese adults to be involved and to participate was like pulling teeth, which has not been true of you at all. So I have had a great time, and I enjoyed it very much. And you guys are a pleasure to teach and a pleasure to be around. So thank y'all very much for letting me have it.
Can you sing your song?
Just you remember.
Get the words out there so you can see them.
Wonderful.
You can play by light, I
Wonderful
see.
night, right?
Yeah, too much.
We're going.
Go back.
No,
you go
Forward.
forward,
Forward, yeah.
forward,
Forward.
forward.
It's another picture.
Forward,
Oh, yeah.
forward, forward.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, now we've got self-conscious.
I'm gonna walk away because.
All right. It's late in the evening. She's wondering what clothes to wear. She puts on her makeup. She brushes her long black hair. And then she asks me, do I look alright? And I say, yes, you look wonderful tonight. Belle of the ballroom, no other girl can compare. She's dressed all in starlight. I can't help but stand and stare. And then she asks me, do you feel alright? And I say, yes, I feel wonderful tonight. I feel wonderful because I see the love light in your eyes. And the wonder of it all is that you just don't realize how much I love you. We dance through the doorway. I carry her up the stair. Her eyes dark and shining. She lets down her long black hair. And then I whisper as I turn out the light.
Hello?
Darling, you look wonderful tonight. I say, darling, you look wonderful tonight.
That's how you steal her car.
Someone should make a movie out of it.
So Abby asked me to go up, so maybe you.
Sorry.
That's it, so we're done.
Thank you so much.
The youngest of the bio, the youngest of the full bio.
Can you take up your glasses? What? The girls wanna do something.
Camera ready.
Oh, what?
That face is a little big for it.
What's that for?
It's like mask. Caleb made it. During summer
So that's, so one thing that you guys should know about parents, at least most dads, I think. So I was a very good dancer when I was in high school.
dancer.
I was a very good dancer in high
What kind of
school.
dance?
Swing dancing, ballroom dancing, and I didn't do that athletically. But once I had kids, then your whole style of dancing changes, because when you're a dad, you know what the point of dancing is?
Make your kids laugh.
To embarrass your children. So now when I dance, it's like. The whole idea is to get your children to say, I don't know that person. I don't know that. Dad, stop!
So did we stop the camera? Are we still recording it?
Well, I don't know, I mean, we can't stop it, because I was a cut
Or
by
you
this off.
dancing to your mom?
She's singing. Yeah, my mom taught me to jitterbug. We were dancing in the living room. I tell you, while we're waiting to get the picture taken, so since most of you did not grow up with liturgy, with the prayers that are scripted, you are likely to find that liturgy is actually very helpful for you because you won't be taking it for granted.
Do you have any website?
Yes, I meant to bring my Book of Common Prayer. The Book of Common Prayer, the 1979 Episcopalian Book of Common. You don't want the current version because they've gone nuts. But the 1979 prayer book it's a classic, and so it is full of high quality praise and high quality prayer. And look, liturgy does two things for you. So one thing is, do you guys know what the church year is? I'm gonna put my glasses back on so I can see. You know what the church year is? So in liturgical churches, and the church has been doing this for 2,000 years, since the first century, you go through different seasons of the year where you're focusing on different parts of your spiritual life. So there are penitential seasons where we're focusing on getting the stuff that's accumulated that's wrong, just straightened out. So Advent and Lent are the periods before Christmas and before Easter, where you are preparing, so the focus there is on repentance. There are feast seasons, there's joy seasons, there's ordinary things, but so you cycle through the church year. You also, the lectionary, you read most of the Bible, not in order, but over the course of 3 years you'll end up reading most of the Bible from the pulpit. And it's scheduled. So the advantage of that is that we all have parts of the truth about God that are really comfortable for us and that we like. They're sort of our favorite parts. And then there are other parts that, at least at the stage that we're in right now, they don't make a lot of sense to us, or they don't, right? What we naturally do is we get stuck on our favorite parts, and we keep going back to those over and over. And most people, so in non-liturgical churches where the preacher picks what to preach on, by the time you've been there 4 or 5 years, you kind of know what his favorite scriptures are and what his favorite topics are, right? What the liturgy does is the liturgy walks you through every one of the important truths of Scripture, including the ones that aren't your favorites, so that you don't get to skip any. And remember we talking a few weeks ago about the importance of getting stuff out of your head and getting it into your heart. Liturgy provides repetition. It helps move that down. So two of so I gave the disciplines of meditation and of liturgy, because those are ways that you can repeat it again. But the other thing that liturgy does is, for 2,000 years, godly and articulate Christians have been writing down praise of God and thanksgiving to God and prayers, and the ones that are the best have survived for 2,000 years. So, when you're teaching a kid to write, and you hold the kid's hand to help them form the letters, and then you give them paper that's got it, and they trace the letters, and the kid learns how to write. You don't make him write to begin with. You help him. Liturgy is a great way for you to practice praise and thanksgiving and talking to God with people who have found the right words. So I have my favorite collects, my favorite prayers, where we get to that part in the year, and I'm so glad that I love this prayer. We get to do this all week, so it's without you having to shift over and become Catholic or become Anglican, there's nothing to stop you from buying the Book of Common Prayer. So in our family, most nights we do Compline, which is a short service, but we have it mostly memorized, because most of it's the same every night, except that we read a different part of the Bible every night. And the general Thanksgiving. The general Thanksgiving that most Anglican churches or Catholic churches will have at the end of the service. There's a phrase: "We thank you for our creation, our preservation, and all the blessings of this life, but above all, for the redemption of the world through your Son, Jesus Christ, for the means of grace and for the hope of glory." If you will pay attention to the words, these are marvelous examples of how to praise God. And the earliest liturgy that we have is the Psalms. Okay? The Psalms were the Israelite Book of Common Prayer. Right? So the Anglican Book of Common Prayer is like a modern Christian section of the Psalms. So you know how you can memorize the Psalms, and you find the Psalms saying what you want to say. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay? By the waters of Babylon. So it's a good thing to read the Psalms on a regular basis, because it helps you learn to praise God. But there are the Oxford Book of Christian Prayer. It's a book that thick. It's just one prayer after another, 2,000 years of prayers from the Greeks, right? And you can use that as sort of the letters that you can trace as you're learning to praise God.